Hello, body lighters. We finally made it. The third week of trying. Oh my gosh. How ridiculous is this? Oh, but anyway, Nicole and I are here streaming live. Hopefully it says we are. So, and we're celebrating Earth Day. So happy birthday. Happy Earth Day, everyone.
Happy birthday, Earthlings.
It's true, it's true. So today we've got the title Earth Dreaming. So we're looking at what the meaning of Earth Day might have for all of us in the middle of this pandemic. It almost seems counterintuitive to be celebrating something like this at a time when we're sort of in a struggle, but we're not humans are not the center of the planet. So what dreams we hold for the future, for a better future of the planet, and for future generations, which is really the biggest concern, I think, and how we can improve our health at a time like this, and we'll have some tips for you about that as well. So, Nicole, why don't you kick it off with what Earth Dreaming is for you?
Okay, I was just sharing this to some more people. Can you give me one more moment, Cheryl? I'm just doing a bit more techie things to invite people in.
Okay, so you're Nicole's doing all the tech for us today, and that's okay. But my thoughts on my dreams, my Earth dreaming today, is for an ecotopia, to have a healthy, beautiful paradise where peace and harmony prevails in relationship with all life. Meaning flora and fauna on the land and the water and the air. And you might actually call me a utopianist. I've probably always been like that. And but that's okay. It's okay to have high aspirations, because I do believe that the aspirations we have in this life are the seeds for the next. So how are you going there, Nicole, with all the tech?
Good. Shared it in one spot. I could keep going, but let's just carry on then. I just want people to join the party.
I know you do. So let's go back to what Earth Dreaming means for you then.
Earth Dreaming. I loved it when, Cheryl had a eureka moment, and she brings through these wonderful topics like this. And so I was so happy to sit and journey with that title of Earth Dreaming, because here we are on our big Mama Earth, obviously. And to be dreaming, to me, evoked so many things. It was dreaming as in having a dream about something, so a waking dream. It spoke to me also about dreaming as in the sleeping dream when we go to bed, and those pieces that come to us from wherever they do in dreamland and dream realm. And it also spoke to me of the co-creative dream. What are the things that we collectively have the opportunity to dream into being right now? Because really, this current situation that we're in is like being in an altered state, because we're in an altered collective consciousness right now. We're not doing things as per usual. So as we're in this suspended state, dreaming is the perfect approach to being with this moment that we're going through, because it allows us to bring in some much bigger ways of thinking. It allows us to play with the symbols of these times, with the mythology of these times, which of course are all the deep, beautiful ways where we mine the gold from our dreams, right? That's how we work with our dreams, our symbols and the metaphors and those bits and pieces. So so we can jump into all of that in our conversation today. And because we have a live conversation happening as well, we're able to have people pop their comments into, which is awesome. So we'll be able to interact with you that way, and hopefully the quality of the stream is going okay.
I'm just checking that actually.
Yep.
Everybody out there, is it all okay? Oh, yes. Oh, there's a lot of buffering where Karen is. Okay, that's okay. Hopefully you can still catch us. Maybe just put us on audio, I'm not sure. But thanks for joining us anyway. It's really nice to have someone out there listening.
Hello to all of you joining us live and everyone watching the replay.
Yeah, and hi Penny. Nice to for you to join us too. So yes, there's a lot to be said for dreaming a new future, and I guess having the space within us for those dreams to occur. And in a way, I think that it's about, when we have those dreams, it's like a metamorphosis, isn't it? It's like the caterpillar, and it undergoes this transformation into a butterfly. And so we've got to be a caterpillar first and be able to create those dreams, and then spin them around us like a cocoon so that we can send them forth into the future full of our aspirations, and bring them into reality, bringing that heaven to earth that all of us connect with, and really so desperately have this longing for a different way of being, living on the planet and treating the planet and all the life on the planet. We want it to be different. And how do we do that when it's just one of us, And that's why it's so important to be in community, to create these peer groups around us, to give us that support to go forward and give each other ideas and help us ground into those ideas and establish them so that they can actually come to fruition.
I think that's such an important point, because dreams, up until now, often we've thought of dreams as an individual exercise, and an individual activity and exploration to go into. And of course, when you look at Jungian dream work and therapy, these are all, you go into the symbology of your own dreamscape. But if there's any one lesson that we're learning right now through this time that we're all in, it's that we are, I'm sure the audience here watching this know this, but of course we're so interconnected on so many levels. So it just makes sense to extend something like our dreaming to the collective. What happens when we amplify these things beyond our personal selves? We obviously have to understand what the meaning is for our personal self within that, so that we're not projecting a whole heap of stuff that probably doesn't need to be out there for other people to deal with. But it's important at the same time that we can work on those different levels as well, so we can have this collective dream taking place. We can, and they used to do this in dream circles as well. People would bring a dream forward for the group. And it was something that the collective then could understand. What does the village need to understand from the dreamer in this moment? Is there a warning coming? Is there, a certain person that's going to come our way? Is there a piece of this that is relevant for all of us right now? And we've forgotten these tools, haven't we?
Yeah. Very much so. I've read various times that there, in some traditions, like the shamans, in some Indigenous peoples groups, they place a lot of relevance on the tribe's dreams. And that's very important. They would collect all that information together, and from there, know what's going on and what is to come. And I think that's very interesting too.
Yeah, I think this is a wonderful time to remember a lot of these skills that we as a species have known before. Our ancestors did this. They understood dreams, they understood nature, they understood how to work with the messages that nature heralded. They knew how to live in a total coexistence, in terms of body, emotion, mind, spirit, with the natural forces. And I'm glad you brought up shamanism, because that is, it doesn't belong to any one part of the world. Shamanism, this is a very ancient way of being that many cultures have their own forms of. And so these ways of being, these ways of knowing, even though for the modern human being might seem a little woo-woo, a bit out there, a bit, hippie tree hugging, in fact, this DNA memory is within us. It's embedded within our very fiber. And so if we reawaken those parts of our DNA memory, those parts of our cultural memory, we can simply tune into a way of knowing that is already deeply ingrained and embedded. We don't have to go do a course. We don't have to go and learn about these things. We have to remember where we are, who we came from, and all of that stuff that is already within us. And when we bring that forward in our collective now, we help each other. We help each other home to ourselves. We help each other remember those pieces. And, you know, you mentioned shamanism. I wanted to talk about animism in this in this chat today as well, which relates to shamanism. And animism is simply a way of being that is deeply in tune with an understanding of nature. And it's funny, my roots are Japanese. I come from a samurai background, a samurai family. We can trace it back about 700 years or so. And so it's a very grounded family line in a certain way of being. And as a kid, I was always very spiritual, but I didn't really have any framework for that. And so I looked around for different kinds of frameworks. And do I belong to this wisdom path or that one, and the Native American Indians or Buddhism or Hinduism, you know, where does that all fit in? And one day I happened to be back in Japan with my mother, and she was talking about how, and she just said this in the most natural way, how the rocks have spirit, the river has spirit, the trees have spirit. And all of these different spirits we're able to communicate with and listen to. And she just said it in the most natural way. And this is my mother, who would never call herself spiritual, wouldn't define herself as having a spiritual bone in her body. And yet what is so deeply ingrained in her culturally, and a level of that still remains in Japan's cultural memory. And it's not a Japanese thing, remember, this goes beyond culture, but they still are keepers of that wisdom, is that they can see and experience and understand that life force energy is infused through the living world that we get to participate in. So that's what animism is. And the shamans are people who live that and walk that as a way of being and work with those elements and life force energy to, you know, bring about healing for the individual and the collective and etc. We know how to do this. It's in us, you know, and I think that's so powerful. It's so beautiful. And this Earth Day to me is that's what I feel passionate about on this Earth Day, to remember that, to be with this Mama Earth in this moment where she is breathing and unshackling after just so much human nonsense for so long. And if anything, I think a big lesson for us right now is to get out of the way. When we get out of the way, and we've got out of Mother Earth's way right now, she's just doing what she's here to do. And when we can get out of our own way in the same way and work with nature as a supreme teacher for us, as a master of how to be and live on this planet, then the real magical stuff starts to happen. We remember, we see, we reconnect, we feel again.
Yeah. Absolutely. And excuse us for not everyone not watching all the time, because when one of us is talking, the other one's checking the comments. So we're trying to sort of see everything all and talk and have great inspiration at the same time, which is not always easy. But we're giving it a go. And I was going to say, I think just building on that, one of the interesting things for me was that one of the very first responses amongst many to this pandemic that we're going through was for people to return to the earth in their own backyards. I could not buy seeds or seedlings anywhere to put a vegetable garden in, but because people were just so quick on the uptake to do it. And no doubt that was a survival response, but by doing so, it was an unconscious biological recognition wired into our brain, or a knowing that the earth will provide for us. But the question then, of course, is, but for how long? And this is why we have to be very respectful about the resources that we use and you know, how we use them. So there's no doubt that humanity is at a critical juncture in its relationship with the natural world. And in this time of, I guess, disintegrating certainties, many of us have big questions too about how are we going to move on from here with those dreams? How are we going to bring them into reality? Once we're on the other side of this pandemic, how should we live? What will be our relationship to the planet? And all those sorts of things, and how can we be good shepherds of the planet and remain connected to the spirit of the planet. And I teach shamanic practices, and you can journey to the spirit of the planet and communicate with it to learn what to absorb the wisdom of the planet. And what it can give you guidance. And this is really important, going back to your dreams, isn't it? About the dreams, about how we can get guidance through these experiences.
Absolutely. And I'd love to invite everyone who's with us. This is the exciting part about getting it live, isn't it, Sheryl? We have people that are joining us live. So, I'd like to invite you, if you're live and even if you're watching the replay as well, to take this moment to ground deeply. Look, every day is Earth Day, isn't it? I've always thought it a bit ridiculous that we humans have to have these particular days to celebrate things like women or, children or Earth. But anyway, aside from that whole other conversation, today is an Earth Day, like every day is an Earth Day. And so I'd love to invite those of you with us to take a moment to ground however you do that, whether it's through the breath, whether you have your own process and practice, but as you're joining us here, to stay connected deeply with Mama Earth. If this is new to you, put your feet on the ground, breathe, let your breath move through your body and imagine it going deep down like roots into the soil. Feel your body like a tree, like a plant growing through, extend into the air, reach out to the stars, whatever it looks like for you. And maybe you're joining us and you're actually outdoors right now, which is cool. Lie down on the ground, let Mama Earth hold you, and be with her in that way. Yeah.
Hi, Karina and Barry. Thanks for joining us, by the way. It's great to have you on. I think one of the things that I'd like human beings to learn from this experience of going through this pandemic is, and I just said this on an interview I just did previous to this one, was that we now have the opportunity to be in the footstep of the animals on the planet, the animal kingdom. For so long we have been intruding on them. So many have become extinct and now are on endangered species list. But now the roles reversed. We are now the ones who are facing our mortality, and we are the ones who are being now endangered. And how does that feel? How does that feel? We're getting a taste of what animals have been through. How do we feel with our own existence being threatened? So I think it's a really good opportunity to have a different perspective, a shift in perspective. Because we've been at war with nature for quite a while, and we've seen some terrible devastation committed against nature in the name of making money and creating jobs, right? And governments have made some really stupid decisions in regard to that and to uproot nature. But by doing so, the foundations for human survival have become uprooted too. So we are so connected with the planet. We have to learn to treat it and value it properly. And one of the things I noticed with myself was when the restrictions first went into place and no one knew what was going on, I started to eat less, and I didn't even choose to do that. And I think it was a biological response to the situation of shortage. It's just reminded me of the nature within myself, how I am a part of nature, and I have a response to situations too. Humans have that, and we know that animals have it in times of when there's a lack of food around. they will behave differently. And I was behaving differently, but it was unconscious. So I thought that was a really interesting insight for myself and a valuable lesson to learn. And I also was very careful with what I threw away in regard to food, because, you know, if you look at an apple seed, the potential for an orchard to exist in one little apple seed is amazing. And when we throw away things so casually, particularly in regard to food, because I have a real thing about wasting food. I do not like it because the resources and the energy that have gone into providing, say, an apple or a banana or something like that, the energy in nature that has been utilized to actually provide that is amazing. And yet we so casually discard bits and pieces. Oh no, I don't feel like that anymore. You know, like, there are people starving in the world too. I was brought up with that. But I wasn't made to eat everything, but there are people starving in the world, I was told. But you know, it's so true that I think we just have lost the understanding of the value of nature and what it continuously provides, what the planet continuously provides, but not forever. And this is where we're at. Our resources are unsustainable, and all unsustainable things end.
So do we choose to be unsustainable?
No.
Yeah.
Exactly. And nature has a Bill of Rights. Did you know that? Because I was just looking up recently, and I'm looking at some notes here. The first rights of a nature bill to recognise, hang on, let me say that again. The first rights of nature bill to recognise the rights of nature and future generations was introduced in Australia only in 2019 in Western Australia. Can you believe that? And the bill is for the purpose of securing the rights of nature to exist and flourish, regenerate and evolve, and provide the people and the government of Western Australia with the ability to defend and enforce these rights on behalf of nature. And I think that what we don't realise is that the planet, the nature, it has rights, but we don't see it as like that. We see it as a resource only, as something that we can go and take from. And I, you know, maybe not us who are listening to this conversation, but, you know, generally society, business, corporations, all those sorts of things, governments even, selling off wonderful pieces of national park to, you know, to go and develop. I mean, what are you thinking, people? What are you thinking? So we have to reorient our perspective about how we see the planet, and that it has rights too. It has rights to live and to exist and to survive itself without us on it. It has that right too, and we have to learn to be very respectful of that.
I love seeing you fight up like this, Sheryl. Absolutely. Absolutely. How wonderful to hear that about, you know, it being written into law. It is our thinking that needs to shift. I mean, our thinking got us here, and we're in a mess collectively. We have an opportunity right now to have a breath and take a pause and to reevaluate. And I truly hope with every fiber of my being that we really embrace this opportunity for a reevaluation. There is some kind of an awakening taking place right now. I mean, the people gathered here are all very smart people, and I have no doubt you too will be looking at a lot of the information that's going on right now out there about what truly is taking place. And we spoke about narratives before in the dreaming. You know, there are several narratives running around right now in terms of what is taking place on this planet as a collective species. And it's all narrative at the end of the day, isn't it? We're all co-creating a story of some sort. And so, you know, as our theme for the day in terms of Earth dreaming, we are in a living dream. You know, we are a species walking in what we think is an awake state of consciousness. And for many, maybe that is a truly awake state of consciousness. You know, there's a whole spectrum in what that might mean. But for the most part, we think we're awake as we're walking around on this planet, and we're getting a shake-up right now as a species to truly take that waking form to another layer of consciousness, to truly wake up and become more conscious of being an alive entity on this planet where we are deeply interconnected and interdependent. We are dependent actually on this planet. The planet's okay without us. So, you know, how can we do better? How can we be better? And we've touched on this in previous conversations as well, you know. How do we become the good custodians that we can be, the guests? How do we be a respectable guest on this planet? And it's that shift from the resource mentality that you mentioned to something completely different, because that, if we choose to readopt that as soon as we get back into some semblance of what was normal, and there will be many who want to just step straight back into how things were because that's what's comfortable. And old behaviors die hard. And so if we go ahead and do that and we simply recreate the same scenario, well, we've just kind of taken one step forward, two steps back again, and off we go. We're going to repeat the same cycle. And that would be pretty stupid and tragic. And, you know, unfortunately, I think we are stupid enough as a species to do that, because look at how many times history has repeated in all kinds of other scenarios where we hurt ourselves and we hurt the planet. We like to think we're smart, don't we, as a species? But boy, you know, if we were looking at ourselves from the perspective of a lizard or a koala or a monkey and looking out at this human species, I really wonder what we would be seeing, you know, because it ain't that smart a lot of the time.
Yeah. I think the paradigm shift in regard to the planet and the environment is about putting the health of the living world at the center of society, rather than it being out here. We have to change and we have to reorient everything so that it is, you know, we don't make any decisions, bad decisions that are going to affect the health of the planet. Because if we do, we affect everything. We affect the animal kingdom, we affect the environment, we affect us, and we're all one and the same. So we have to, and it's a big shift in perspective, you know, it's very far reaching, and it's not an easy one for a lot of people to think about. And even myself, over the years, I've seen how I have progressed towards that, and it's taken me time to do that. And it will take time, but we don't have that time. We don't have a lot of time now. While we're all focused on the pandemic, there's all the environmental problems that are still happening, that are going on, and we still have to work very hard and very quickly and very tirelessly at fixing those, so that we have a future and our children have a future.
And I think one of the greatest challenges with that shift, I'm seeing a whole heap of loves and likes float up right now, Sheryl, so bang, that hit some people. You know, one of the greatest challenges of that is it's one thing, and it's very easy, isn't it, to have an intention and say, yes, I want the best for the planet. You know, of course we all do. We can all say that very easily, and we can come together on a day like this Earth Day and say, yes, that's such a beautiful thing to do, let's all do that. But of course, in order to take that collective action, it always begins with the personal action. And so if we are to be non-violent to the planet, that means we have to be non-violent to ourselves. If we are to walk gently upon the planet, we must walk gently within our own lives. So what does that look like now? And if we can each take the time to simply be in full presence with ourselves as a living being and say, in what ways do I harm myself? In what ways do I cause harm to myself? Often we do it without knowing or understanding that we're even doing that, you know, and this isn't the time to get into blame games and, you know, feeling bad about things and punishing ourselves. That's another level of injuring ourselves, right? But think of a newborn baby when it comes into the world. The last thing you're going to do is injure that being. I mean, you do everything in your power to try and cotton ball it and bring it into the world in the best way possible. And you would fall over yourself to create an environment of love for that gorgeous, innocent being, right? The vast majority of us would. And it's that. Can we do that with ourselves? We're not trained to do this. We're not taught to do this, nor are we encouraged to. We're kind of taught to pick yourself up, get on, don't cry, get on with life, brush, 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 go. And so we grow a thick skin in doing that. And it can be quite challenging to be gentle with ourselves. It can be incredibly confronting to look at the ways that we harm ourselves. How is this action potentially harming part of this entity that I am, physically, emotionally, psychologically, or spiritually? And if we can become really present to our actions, very mindful of each action that we are taking, each thought that is going through us, each word that is coming out of our mouth, and whether it is something that is working as a harm or a hindrance or a help, is it something gentle? And the Buddhists have a wonderful way of talking about words. For example, what is it? Is it kind? Is it necessary? And there's one other part of that. I can't remember it. If you're here in the chat, let me know what I'm forgetting there, because I know someone out there knows this. Being able to be gentle is a radical practice, right? It shifts how we are fundamentally. It shifts how we walk. It's things like you said, Sheryl, instead of just throwing away the apple, as we cultivate gentleness, we start to look at the seed of that apple and we see the seed of life. We see the orchard within that apple. That is a gentle act. That is a life-giving, nourishing act. And it takes softness and gentleness and quietness to truly appreciate love those moments, the most minuscule parts. And so that's where the magic is, in the slowdown. Then we start to really see and experience the miraculous in the everyday parts of life. So gentleness is a radical path. And then gentleness, once we're doing that, once we understand what that even means, being gentle with ourselves, now how do we do that as a practice with other people? How can I, in each interaction, cultivate and walk the road of gentleness, of peace, of non-violence? How do I be non-violent in my relationships with others? Once again, this can be a radical practice. When we do that, we transform. And I tell you, as you start to do that, the people around you will kind of look at you and be like, what was that? What was that experience about? Because we, in the modern world, we live in a very violent world. Media is an assault on our senses. You step outside your door and the road and cars and the world and the noise, particularly if we live in a city, is an assault on our senses. There is a whole heap of violence coming on this very soft, natural beast that we are, because we are creatures of nature. We are creations of nature. It's, if you picked a flower, which is something we love to do, don't we? We love to pick flowers, even that act in itself, right? We like to cut things rather than grow them and be at the root. We like to cut them, and I'm just as guilty of that. I do that too. We cut the flowers, but of course we know that can't last. And walking out in this world sometimes can feel like being a flower that's been ripped out of the ground, and there's only so long we're going to last within that. That's not a sustainable energy. So gentleness, walking that path of gentleness, adopting a non-violent way of being, naturally grounds us back to nature. And look, having said that, there's a lot of violence in nature as well. We have to look at the entire ecosystem. But I guess because we are surrounded already with so much, that is not of that, that is not soft, that is very harsh in the modern world, that's why it can be such a wonderful way to reground. in nature by getting soft again.
And of course, applying all those principles to the planet, you know, how softly do we and gently do we walk on the planet? How do we treat living beings, whether they're flora or fauna? And I guess that's a reorientation, and I guess a reminder for all of us that to check in with that again, you know, because it's so easy to lose those things living in the concrete jungle. But one of the ways I think we can connect to it is about stopping and smelling the roses, because that really means to slow down, to slow down. And when you do that, you notice things in nature that you wouldn't ordinarily notice. And I was having a conversation with Barry about this the other day, because he's into photography, and I've been out on a couple of photo shoots with him, and to see the planet through the eyes of a lens, you see the environment with different eyes. You notice things like the play of light and shadow and the small things. He's taken a wonderful photo of a bee in water, but it's alive, and its wings are doing this, and it's creating this incredible you know, circles around the wings. And to get that shot, he's had to zoom in on that particular image, and we would never notice that the bee was on the water, and we would never notice these concentric circles that it's creating around itself on the water if we didn't slow down. And this is the beauty of doing photography, I think, and it's a wonderful thing to be able to really get you back in touch with the planet, with nature, with everything on it, actually, and see the beauty in the small things. And he was telling me about, and maybe you can type it in here into the comments, there's a particular time of day at sunrise and sunset where the light allows a photographer to catch the perfect image. And in that perfection, there is something really magical that happens. There is something that you stop, you see it, and for a moment you see a glimpse of something bigger than what you're actually looking at. You can call it divinity if you like, because it's the divine perfect moment, you know. So and I think this is what we need to do, is to slow down. And I'm not saying go to snail's pace in life, because that's unrealistic in our 21st century living, but to slow down when you are in nature, to slow it down even more. Don't just go walking, but look at the little things and appreciate that. And then the more we do that, it's a bit like meditation. The more we do that, the more our consciousness expands, and we awaken to the reverence for nature that we can have, because it is from a divine place where we are too. And we can't get that unless we recognize all of it.
You're reminding me of a story I wanted to share too, Sheryl, of, you know, the beauty when we're not in a beautiful state, you know, of finding beauty, and how nature can be a wonderful teacher, especially when we're surrounded in an environment that's not ideal. Because of course, if we're out in the jungle, if we're out in the forest, if we're in a beautiful garden, we can enjoy the heavenly way of being, right? And it's so easy, and like the sunset, it's so easy in those moments to just expand into it and feel that, and that's so wonderful. And I remember this one time I was living in a town in Canada, which was really, really industrial. I mean, you can see the big chimneys. I could smell the stuff that was coming out of the chimneys, and everything was concrete, and all the, you know, the streets looked gridded. And I felt so claustrophobic, because I didn't know where the mountains were or where the ocean was, and everything just looked like concrete. And it was really getting me down at that point. And I was yearning to be back in those natural spaces where I've spent so much time, because I knew that was what was so health-giving for me. And I'm sharing this story, by the way, now because, you know, many people are in confinement far from natural spaces. and unable to connect with nature in a perhaps ideal way. And someone very wise, a woman who had done shamanic training and worked with plants and plant medicine, sat me down one day and she said, "Nicole, pay attention to the weeds." And I thought, And she said, "You go out and you pay attention to the weeds." And I said, "Okay." And so off I went, and went for this walk in the same old neighborhood with the same old concrete bits and pieces. And all of a sudden, bless this woman for saying that, because all of a sudden my lenses that I had through my eyes transformed the exact same scape into something that was sacred and holy. And I started seeing how nature, through the cracks in the pavement, in one of the most awful situations on earth, the epitome of the modern, construction, how even in that, nature is able to penetrate through these cracks of concrete and burst through in pockets of green. And she pointed out to me that the weeds actually are such a potent medicine, because they might not be the delicate lilies and orchids of the rainforest, but the weeds have the medicine of resilience, because they have been through thick and thin to fight their way and still come out. And they're simple, and they're everywhere, and they're so hardy. And that was like a real aha moment for me, So I just wanted to share that today as well, that, nature is everywhere. Nature is everywhere. I mean, every breath, right? And even if you're far from the greens, even if you truly are in a place, there are people locked in hotel rooms for 2 weeks sometimes in some places, and they're not even allowed out of their doors, and they don't even have a window to go out, That's, you want to talk about claustrophobic, that's insane, right? So how can we, even in those spaces and moments, still connect to nature, to know that we have stardust in our bones and our being, to know that with each in-breath and out-breath, we're still connected to the natural world. The water has memories, all of these ways we can still connect. And so for those of us that are starved of the big forest right now, to find whatever ways possible to connect, not only with the external natural world, but to go deep within and to know that nature is us. We are of nature. We are nature. Yeah.
Yeah, nature certainly does abhor a vacuum. And I had a similar story many years ago when I was unwell for 10 long years. And to heal myself, I was doing gardening every single day. My neighbours actually were waiting for me to move the bed into the front yard, because I was there all the time, every time they looked out the window. And I didn't have a weed in the front garden, except for there's one weed in the concrete in the stairs. And I left it there. I left it there for a long time, because it was a daily reminder for me about hope and survival, about the future, about healing, and the power of living things. And I learned a lot just from looking at that little plant that had come up among the concrete every day. But nature certainly does abhor a vacuum, and I've been very chuffed, I could say, at seeing these images of the animals that are actually streaming back into various cities around the planet, while humanity has become still. And we even saw an image of a kangaroo jumping down the city street in Adelaide the other day. And I thought that after all these years, us Australians have been trying to convince international people that kangaroos don't actually jump down the streets in Australia, but here it is.
They do now.
So it's a very interesting thing to observe all of this going on, to see the changes and to see, the different things like pollution has been cut, and the first time in certain towns and cities you can see the sky, and the canals in Venice are cleared up, and only because the silt had gone down, but animals had come in. Swans had reappeared in the canals in Venice, and all sorts of really interesting things. my hope is that through those observations that we learn something very profound, that we can take that on board and say, yeah, actually we could share more with the animal kingdom around us, rather than it, sort of because of our activities, it's sort of shoved to the sidelines. Maybe we can find a happy medium where we can have more of that in our daily living, in cities too. Maybe we can do things to help protect the animals so that they can come into the cities if they're not too scared. That would be wonderful. But I was going to sort of talk about the benefits of being nature. If we're up to that, are we up to that, Nicole?
We're up to wherever we're up to, Sheryl, and we've got some beautiful comments coming through as well, so.
Great.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just having a quick look at that. So one thing that I have really come into, developed an interest in is sound healing. And this I've come to understand, and I wish I'd had it. I had a dry leaf rattle that I actually used in some of my trainings, in my shamanic trainings, but to shake it and hear the sound of the leaves. And the sounds of nature calm our nervous system and give us the feeling that no matter what's going on in our life, that all is well, it will be okay. Tomorrow, there's another day tomorrow, and all those sorts of things. So we know through various studies that sounds affect us. And when we don't hear the sounds of nature, and we don't hear the birds outside or the wind going through the leaves, that actually has a bit of a detrimental effect to us, because we're a part of that, and we have that disconnect becomes really more obvious to us. And for many years, like some of you, I'm sure, I worked in an office for 14 years in a multi-story building, and I really, looking back now, I see that that had a serious compounding effect on me in regard to one, being unhappy in the job, but two, if I'd been in a different environment, then maybe it would have made a big difference, maybe in a more natural environment. And the other thing too is fragrances that we get from nature. When you walk in nature, especially in rainforests or wooded areas, you brush up against trees and bushes. And when you do, some of that flora releases its perfumes, and particularly if you snap a branch and there's you can get the resins from the plants that will snap open. We actually become available to us. And I use essential oils at home because they have antiviral properties as well, which is really important at the moment. So so we can get those benefits as well. Being in nature also increases oxygen. So it's much clearer. There's no emissions for our body to deal with, and we're getting a higher amount of oxygen that we can breathe in. And who hasn't spent a day at the beach or out on a bushwalk or something and come home and been absolutely exhausted because you have this beautiful, clean, fresh air, the higher oxygen content, and being out in the sun and all those sorts of things, really beneficial to the immune system, which we need at the moment. Have you found any other things like that, Nicole?
Well, I just wanted to extend on your point about the importance of our senses. Isn't it funny how we go out walking and we might go out into the woods or nature, and what's the first thing we do? We plug something into our ears, and so we're not listening to the birds, the breeze, the sounds, right? We're not listening to the natural scape, right? So many of us are just plugged in every single day with artificial sounds. Another part that you touched on with our olfactory, this is something I'm pretty concerned about as a species moving forward. And I clicked onto this when I was a teenager. I don't know why teenagers have to spray themselves so heavily with like these whole cans of, right? And then, of course, we carry on and do that as adults, these big, heavy duty, goodness knows what's inside those aerosol cans, spraying them onto the system, spraying them in places where our natural body scents are supposed to come through. And when you think of basic biology, and one of the things that brings together people are this is a really primal attraction here, but it's our sense of smell. And that is, it's so beyond our thinking brain, and we wonder sometimes why we're attracted to certain people. But that when we strip away all of those artificial smells, and we strip away the artificial things that we're putting into our body that disrupt our natural processes of actually being able to smell properly, so that, you know, our reproductive system is going as nature intended, we start to smell one another in different ways, and we actually have different relationships with each other based on that. And so it happens again and again where people get into a relationship together and down the road find they're no longer attracted to each other, or biologically something's totally out of whack. And this can be something as simple as retuning our ability to smell. It might seem really strange, but it's just another way in which our senses, one of our channels, have been switched off from the natural world. And it's disturbing to me how normalized it's become to switch our senses off like that. Truly. Yeah. And so even just coming back to our own body and discovering the joys of really like sensory pleasures can be mind-blowing as well. And again, that relates back to that slowing down too that you mentioned, but it connects to nature. Yeah.
One of the really interesting things I read was that in a study carried out in London, it was found that people who lived near trees had much better mental health. And researchers discovered that the more trees that could be found in any location, the fewer number of people who were being prescribed antidepressants. And I find that really, really interesting, you know, and I have some trees here. I have a big one out the front. And there's something about being around trees. You know, you can go hug a tree, and that sounds like a cliche, but when you do, something really interesting happens. And in some of the trainings that I've done, not particularly in shamanic practices, but in Reiki many years ago, and I didn't realize I was already doing it, I was teaching people to tune into the trees to see what messages that they would give them, and to tune into the mountains to see what information they would give them. And it's a really, you know, when you start to realize that you can access information from those things around you, then your perspective about reality, it just shifts big time. Suddenly you can get information from all sorts of living creatures and even non-living creatures, like you were saying before with the animism. Tuning into that, it's quite astounding. And I've had my mind blown over that many times, many times.
One other piece I wanted to share in this conversation was we live in, it's this term monophasic, and there's monophasic and polyphasic. So we live in a world right now that is monophasic, which means it values the supposedly rational, conscious state of being, waking consciousness, right? And of course, you know, we came through with the Great Enlightenment and then science, etc. And so the rational mind has been winning so far. And part of the great shift that has been taking place for a long time now, but is being accelerated at this point in time, part of that great shift is understanding that way of thinking and being in the world has limitations. And so historically what we've done is we've moved out of being polyphasic, which is where we had a reverence and a respect for altered states, for what we consider today non-ordinary states, or what I would call expanded states. We had a respect and a reverence for that, and we could wind it into part of the daily way of being. We understood that the sacred was part of the ordinary fabric. And that was phased out. And then so the polyphasic was phased out, and the monophasic way came in and came to the fore. And so I think part of what's happening right now for so many people that feel like a black sheep in this modern world, it's because they have a polyphasic way of being. They understand that there is a sacredness that is intrinsic in the world, in nature, in our interconnected being on this planet. And so these people just feel like they don't quite fit in to the modern world. And what's taking place is more of those people are talking. More of those people have been stepping forward. More of those people are having direct experiences of things that cannot be understood by the limited scientific monophasic mindset, right? It's simply too like blinders are on. So I feel where we're going is not swinging again the pendulum. I don't think that's useful, swinging from one to the other, because we carry on this dualistic mode of being. But I really feel where we're going, where we can go as this co-creative earth to its next phase of amazingness, is when we start to bring the beauty of both of those together. So where we can bring in all that we have learned through this so-called enlightened age, you know, of the scientific rational mindset, and I call it so-called enlightened because there's a lot that has not been enlightening at all about it, with this kind of renaissance of enlightenment in terms of expanded states of consciousness. And how do we bring all of that together now so that we get folks who have awakened a greater way of being and can be incredibly grounded on the planet with the tools that we have at this time? How do we, you know, get going? And these are the people I call agents of awesome. How do they get going in the world at this time to actively create and participate in whatever is to come? And I think that's the really exciting part of this dream right now, of this collective dream that we can be in, both of the beyond waking consciousness and waking consciousness. For me, it's like it's all coming together right now. We don't have to slide in this pendulum between one or the other. It's like, let's bring it all forward. Let's bring the best parts of all of that forward and carry on as a species to what is hopefully a more awakened way of being.
I think there's a merging of various movements going on at the moment, quietly, but they're happening. Some not so quiet, actually. And I don't know if I mentioned it with you last time, but the cultural creatives, the ones who are sort of like this new movement, but they don't even know that each other exists. And they are very surprised to find out when other people do, because there's nothing about what's important to them or values that is actually in the media. I can't say that quite clearly, but what I'm trying to get at is that they're mixing, they're merging, and they've built off of other movements prior to them. The women's movement, the Green Revolution, the well, I don't know, there's so many revolutions, I can't even think, civil rights and all those sorts of things, right? They're all mixed in there, and then they've emerged from that, and they're children of those people, and children of those children have all merged, and they're called the cultural creatives. And there's actually a great book called that, Cultural Creatives, How 50 Million People Are Changing the World. And it's really heartening to know that there is a group, a demographic like that is working together to in the environmental fields and in all sorts of other fields that are acting as catalysts for the changes towards an advanced society, to bring those into existence. They're happening, and I guess I'd like to sort of round up on the note that even if we don't see the things happening which we dearly want to see and are longing to see, that they're actually bubbling along very quietly, like lava under the earth, you know. And every now and then you see something pop up, and another thing pop up, and another thing pop up, and you go, oh, that's great, oh, that's great, what's great? One day, enough of those are going to pop up, and then we're going to have the shift. We're going to have a greater shift. You don't have to have everyone on the planet choosing to be more environmentally concerned and you know, even socially conscious and spiritually engaged. You don't have to have all of them. You just need a certain percentage to get to that tipping point and then it just goes over. And that's all we need. So we just keep on going.
Yeah.
Doing what you're doing, people, whatever it is, being active in your own community, being a hub in your own community and helping other people, linking them up and, you know, sharing resources and ideas and all those sorts of things, to keep things moving. That's really what we need, is to keep things moving in the right direction.
You know, and I feel that I've always felt this, that humans at their core are innately good. And those bits of great that you're talking about there, Sheryl, you know, there is more than enough of that. And I think, you know, part of what's important in reaching the tipping point, I think we have the numbers. I think we have the momentum. Part of the issue is those pockets feeling isolated. And you've touched on that before, not knowing that other people are doing those amazing things. There is so much amazingness going on, so much. But it's because we have this bombardment of all of these other messages, this greater cultural narrative, the strong cultural narrative that is on in the modern world, creates a sense of isolation. And look at what is going on right now. We are being isolated from each other even more. And is that because there is something greater taking place and there are powers that be that might know that something wonderful is, you know, it's inevitable that that's going to happen? I feel it's inevitable, you know, it's when, right? And how do we get this going? Because to me, it just seems like there's too many people that can see a better alternative. There's too many people that understand that we can do better, and that, you know, it doesn't have to be the way it is in many ways, you know. That's exciting. I think that's tremendously exciting. And that's part of the big opportunity that's available right now. And even those who maybe were on the edges and not like at that forefront of that tipping point, but now there's more on the edges who are kind of joining aboard going, oh, isn't that interesting? Some of those pieces just don't seem quite right, you know, or the world that I thought it was. Why am I questioning that right now? That's a healthy process, you know. It's healthy to have a skeptical mind. It's healthy to ask questions. It's healthy to look very eyes wide open at what is going on. And if you feel that there is a dissonance between what you are experiencing and what you are being told, listen to that. Pay attention to that. You are wise beyond measure. And that wisdom within you holds keys and answers. And if we can just strip a few layers back, get quiet again, and listen and trust, wow, you know, we're going to move fast.
So maybe we should wind this up now. So I'd just like to remind everyone that not only is food our medicine, which many of us know, but nature is our doctor. Mother Earth is our supplier, our resource, and we need to respect that and to allow her to have her Bill of Rights as well, and go forth from there. And I think if we can hold on to all those ideas, then we're well and truly on our way. Any words for you, Nicole?
I just want to thank all of those who joined us live. Beautiful to be connected with you as always. I'm glad that we finally got our weekly conversation happening with a live broadcast so you guys could join us as well. And we'll carry on this conversation and see where we go. Blessed Earth Day to one and all on this day and every day.
Yes.
And what was it in the beginning? Happy birthday, Earthlings. Yeah. I love that.
Nanu.
All right.
Okay.
You need to have any closing words for the page, or can I just hit the magic button?
No, I think that's fine. So bye everyone, and we'll be back here again. We think we will now, every Wednesday on the Body Light Centre page at 12 noon.
Much love.
Bye.